So I'm excited that we have such a stellar cast of panelists who will enlighten us about the science, about the economic and national security aspects of this crisis, and the ethical and moral aspects, which will, as Stephanie said, which will affect those more marginalized populations here in our country and around the world more than those of us who are more fortunate. I'm also thrilled that we have representatives from various campaigns here that Scott will mention. Thank you all for taking time in a very, very busy time. Most of all, I'm delighted that you all came. It's a lesson of history that justice is only advanced and defended when citizens engage in our democratic processes. My organization exists to help people like you engage actively in our civic society. I'd be delighted to say more, but our purpose tonight is not to listen to me. It's to put the climate crisis back on the front burner of our political discourse. As citizens, we deserve to know how our leaders and those who seek to be our leaders will handle what I personally view as the biggest crisis of our time. So this kind of dialogue isn't easy to create, so we're very lucky that Scott Spradling is moderating our forum tonight. I can think of nobody better than Scott. With his long experience at WMUR, his management of 3 presidential primary debates, and his well-earned reputation across the state as a person of ability and integrity. When the idea of this forum first came up, Scott and I decided to get together and talk about it halfway between Durham, where I live, here in Durham, and Concord, where Scott lives. So I suggested that we meet in Northwood, which is about halfway, for lunch at Susty's, the vegan cafe that I am a fan of. Despite that setback to our relationship, Scott and I have formed a close partnership. He's forgiven me Susty's and even invited me to the Durham House of Pizza here a couple weeks ago. So I'm delighted to introduce Scott Spradling.
Hi everybody, it's nice to see so many faces here, and welcome to what I consider a new and very different type of social political experiment. In my years working in the media, I don't know that any type of a forum has ever been put together quite like this one before. And in that, I mean that we have presenters, we have campaigns represented here, as well as you. And what I'm hoping is, over the course of the next little bit of time, we're going to be able to get some information, stimulate your brains a little bit, get you asking some questions, and also potentially foster a little bit of a dialogue and see if we can't move the ball forward a little bit on just greater understanding. I'm not sure if we have a room full of true believers, a room half filled with skeptics, maybe a little bit of both, but the bottom line is we've tried to put a group of people together that represents a number of different walks of life that allows you to perhaps spread your horizons a little bit of an understanding of what's going on out there and what can be done about it. So here's how the basic format's going to work. Each of these distinguished panelists will take their turns, giving you a few minutes worth of their perspective on the science, on the environmental, on the business aspect, and even the sort of the moral need to address environmental issues and environmental change. At that point, I want you to be able to get involved. I'll stop it at that point after all 4 have gone and open it up for you to ask questions. So listen closely if something confuses you or something that maybe you don't agree with or something you want re-emphasized or clarified. At that point, just throw your hand up in the air. Let's get a few questions going. After we've done that for a little bit, I'm going to bring the representatives of the campaigns in. We have 5 campaigns represented tonight. Unfortunately, we were going to have a representative from John McCain's campaign, but some form of a personal emergency came up literally just a couple of hours ago, and that person was unable to attend. But we have campaign representatives from Barack Obama, from Jeanne Shaheen, from John Sununu, from Jeb Bradley, and from Carol Shea Porter. So you've got the 1st Congressional District, U.S. Senate, and at least one of the 2 presidential candidates. We left the 2nd CD alone because those 2 candidates are literally debating on the air on Channel 9 right now, and those resources are a little tied up. So we let them have the pass, but we have 3 campaigns represented. I'm very pleased to have these folks here, and just so that you know, not all of them are going to make comments, but if you do have questions for them, a question that maybe perhaps can't be answered tonight, because remember, these are surrogates, volunteers, and campaign staff. If we don't have the answer for you, please have your email ready, because at the very least, I want you to be able to take something away from this. So if you don't get the answer tonight, you'll get the answer before next week. We have 1 week to go, decision time, and I'm really glad you're all here. So let me get to the first introduction of our first guest, who's going to lead us on a little lesson of environmental change. Dr. Cameron Wake is considered a national expert on the environment and climate change. Dr. Wake studies regional climate and environmental change through the analysis of ice cores and instrumental records. He's led programs to reconstruct climate change from ice cores recovered from glaciers on the Tibetan Plateau and in the Canadian Arctic. Dr. Wake is also involved in the AirMap project, which seeks to improve understanding of New England's changing climate and air quality. He leads the related Inhale project that's investigating links between air quality and human health right here in New England. As part of the Northeast Climate Impact Assessment, he was co-lead on 2 research papers and a series of reports detailing past and future climate change in the U.S. Northeast. Dr. Wake teaches several classes here at UNH, including Global Environmental Change, Earth System Science, and Climate and Health. He also led a team that produced a design guide for Earth System Science education, which basically summarizes lessons learned from 15 years of NASA-supported education programs. He serves on the UNH Energy Task Force. He's a faculty fellow in the Office of the Vice President for Research and is chair of the Undergraduate Research Conference Planning Committee. He also serves as Chief Scientific Advisor for Clean Air, Cool Planet, a nonprofit organization finding and promoting solutions to global warming. Basically, he's a really smart guy. And I introduce Dr. Wake.
That's your definition of smart, Scott. I'm in a lot of trouble. All right, hopefully our AV is going to work. That's all I have to do, press the computer.
That's the definition of smart.
I'd actually like to start tonight not talking about the science of climate change, but talking about why I believe this is a key moral issue. And I think there's many different dimensions to that, but I just want to share 2 with you this evening. The first, as was already mentioned, it is those who are most vulnerable in our society who are going to suffer the most from the results of climate change. And I can't think of any better example than Hurricane Katrina. If you look at the impacts of Hurricane Katrina, or you've been down to New Orleans since, you can clearly see it was those that were at the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder, or those who were in the hospital that suffered the most. That's one example. A second example is, when all of you drove here tonight, or took the bus, maybe some of you, you emitted carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide is going to be in the atmosphere for, on average, 100 years. So the other moral dimension for me is that we're reaping all the benefits of the inexpensive energy that we're using, and we're pushing all the problems off on our children and grandchildren, making this a moral issue. So that's where how I frame it. That's enough for something that I don't know that much about, and now I'm going to focus on the science. So I'm trying to answer this question, why do candidates need to be talking about climate change? Just a query, how many points did the Dow Jones gain today? 900, right? How many of you don't know what that means? All right, a smattering. It did really well. A lot of people made money today. But I think that the economic indicators are actually in front of us all the time, and we pay attention to them. And I think one of the reasons that I'm going to talk about, one of the reasons our candidates need to talk about climate change because of what might happen if we don't. But I think one of the reasons that they don't is that those indicators are not in front of us all the time. And I want to share with you a couple of those indicators tonight. I'm going to share with you 2 sort of key global environmental change records. This is probably the most famous one. It's the Keeling curve that's come from Mauna Loa in Hawaii. You can see it starts in 1957, which is when we first began monitoring carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we're now up at about, most recently up about 385 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That slow, steady climb is the result primarily of taking fossil fuels from the crust, burning the carbon, oxidizing it to get energy, and releasing carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. The red line represents the annual inhalation and exhalation of the biosphere. But this is a key indicator, and I think that we should all know actually what the carbon dioxide level is in the atmosphere. That 385 parts per million should be part of our lexicon. And also there's a big movement now that's been started by James Hansen from NASA GISS, really being pushed by the author Bill McKibben now, basically looking to stabilize atmospheric concentrations at 350 parts per million. That is all a number that you should know.